Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Employers in the UK are fearful about the kind of immigration system that ministers could introduce after Brexit. That's according to the government's official advisor on these matters, the Migration Advisory Committee. The Home Secretary Amber Rudd asked the committee to look at EU migration last summer, in the light of the Brexit negotiations, of course, and their interim report is out today. Well, the chairman of the Migration Advisory Committee is Professor Alan Manning, and he joins me now. Welcome to the programme. Why do you say in your report that businesses are fearful about the kind of post-Brexit immigration system the government could introduce?
I mean, part of it is simply the uncertainty about not knowing what the future system will be. But there are also other concerns. I mean, for higher skill employers, they're worried about European workers being brought under the current non-EU system, which they generally don't have a high opinion of. And for lower skill employers, the current non-EU system simply doesn't allow them to bring in any workers at all. So they're worried about what the future holds for them.
Right, and what's your evidence for saying in the report that EU workers are higher quality and more eager than British workers?
I think we don't say exactly that. So, I mean, what we show in the report is that there's quite an important difference between EU workers from the older member states, the countries that were members before 2004, who tend to be higher skilled and better paid than the average Briton. But those workers from the new member states, the countries that joined after 2004, tend to be lower skilled jobs and are paid on average less than the average Briton.
So if the government goes ahead with cutting immigration significantly, let's say it gets a bit closer, which it hasn't done obviously over the last few years, getting down to that net migration target of 100,000 or just below, which is less than half of what it is now, would that result, in your opinion, in better jobs and higher wages for people who are already in Britain?
We haven't come to a firm conclusion on that yet. This is an interim report and our view on that will be in our final report in September. But we don't think that the evidence points to any large effect on European migration on the labour market opportunities of Britons. And the evidence for that is that unemployment is at a 40-year low. Although we've had a very bad decade for people's living standards, it seems to be connected much more to the financial crisis. And actually lower skilled Britons haven't done worse than higher skilled Britons, which is what you might expect to see if European migration had had a bad effect on labour market opportunities for them.
Alan Manning, stay with us. Let me just get your response, Andy Street, to what you've heard. If I use this sentence from the report, it seemed plausible to us that EEA migrants from the European Economic Area are sometimes a higher quality, eager workforce compared to UK-born nine workers, they say, in similar occupations. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't. I think what I see across the West Midlands, for example, is that we have incredible capability amongst our domestic workers, but they have not been sufficient in either number or actually the qualifications they've got to keep up with some of the really high growth industries. If you look at engineering and manufacturing, and we've needed to bring people in. Now, I see the opportunity at the end of Brexit for our own domestic immigration policy as an opportunity to make sure that we do still continue to draw people in where they are needed by our businesses. But it is absolutely no substitute for our own people getting the right skills to be successful going forward. It's got to be both.
Do you understand and sympathise with businesses who are fearful in the way that Alan Manning described, that they worry about an immigration system that might be similar to the one currently for non-EU workers, which they obviously don't think is very successful?
Yes, I do. I hear businesses all the time across the West Midlands saying to me, where are we going to find sufficient of the right quality people in the future? But I see this as an opportunity for us to actually get that right. So the report is welcome. The report's right to call out the concern. It's there. I hear it every day. But we have got to design the system to meet that going forward.
All right, let's talk about the overall impact, Alan, on the economy. I mean, would tax revenues and economic growth fall significantly if the government slashes migration to under 100,000?
Well, that would depend a lot on the way in which net migration was cut. So it's really impossible to answer that without more detail. I mean, again, the fiscal impacts on the public finances of European migration is something, again, we'll be considering in our final report. So I'm afraid we haven't come to any conclusion on that at the moment.
Right, OK. I mean, when you say you'd need to know how it's being cut, I mean, the target has been that net migration would fall to less than 100,000. Does that worry you in terms of an impact on the economy or not?
I mean, it depends a lot. There's a huge difference in the amount of tax paid, depending, for example, on how much you earn. There's a huge difference in the amount of public services that you consume, depending on your age and household circumstances. And so a lot depends not just on the total numbers, but on who those individuals are and what they're doing.
Right. I mean, do you support that arbitrary figure, which is what many people have said, of going under 100,000? When we spoke last time about this, you said perhaps 150,000 would be better. Do you still feel that?
So let's be clear. Your word arbitrary is absolutely right. And I think in terms of guiding that we expect the number to be lower, that's right. But I said, hang on, there is really something really important about making sure our growth sectors have the mix of domestic and international calibre people. I mean, it's worked for other countries around the world, and I think the number will be a little more, but that's got to be worked through by the new policy.
Right. And finally, Alan, you've just said earlier in the interviews, your interim report, the final version is due out in September. Isn't that going to be a bit late? If you think about the clock ticking that Michel Barnier always likes to talk about, Brexit deal being done in October, there'll only be a month to read your final report for government ministers and then design this immigration system post-Brexit.
Well, our report, our final report, is designed to provide an evidence base for the immigration system that the UK has after the end of the implementation period. So this is 2021. So this is still some way away. But
yeah, but there'll have to be a deal done in October that would surely have to have the nuts and bolts of an immigration system, even post the implementation period.
I don't know about that. I mean, it depends upon whether the UK becomes like many other countries, Canada and so on, which just decides its immigration policy on its own, or whether it's part of the negotiation. And that's not something I have any knowledge of, really.
All right. Alan, thank you very much for joining us.
British employers are concerned about their ability to recruit workers from the EU after Brexit, according to new research by government advisers. The Migration Advisory Committee heard from more than 400 businesses and organisations. They found that many businesses see European migrants as more motivated, flexible and willing to work longer hours than their British counterparts. Our home editor Mark Easton reports from the West Midlands.
As British and stylish as James Bond himself, the Aston Martin is one of the West Midlands' most iconic creations. Only around 5% of workers here come from the European Union, but the prospect of losing access to skilled engineers from outside the UK after Brexit leaves the boss shaken, if not stirred.
Well, Aston Martin is a global company, so we need access to the best global talent.
Why can't we get British workers to do the jobs that you're employing foreigners for?
Well, I'm sure we can. I mean, these are high-skilled jobs, and you need to invest in the training. And we're doing that now. We're recruiting every year more and more apprentices, but it takes 10 years to create an engineer.
Today's migration report identifies widespread concern among employers that a post-Brexit policy designed to reduce net migration to the tens of thousands will damage growth and threaten jobs. Today, the West Midlands Mayor was in Westminster pressing the case for a policy to protect his region's economy.
What I often hear is how there is already a skills shortage, for example, in engineering, in the advanced manufacturing sector. And it's good that we're going to be responsible for our own migration policy, but we're going to need to make sure that people in really important roles are able to come in the future.
The government's migration advisers, though, say their concern is not the short-term profits of UK business, but the long-term welfare of British people. And that might mean more training and better pay for homegrown workers in sectors where business has exploited a ready and willing pool of foreign labour. It's the Balti argument.
Birmingham's famous take on Indian cuisine employs large numbers of migrant chefs. But why not train local people instead? It's a question that Leave activist Saki Bhatti believes should be asked about EU workers too.
There are many opportunities that have arisen from Brexit. Of course, if you've got chefs who are trained in faulty restaurants, for example, they have a certain skill set. What we need to do is have a system where that skill set is then transferred over to our young people, because of course they are the future of our region and the future of our generations.
The West Midlands engine, as they call it, powers a quarter of all UK exports. But tuning the economy for a low migration post-Brexit journey will be challenging, with or without a James Bond ejector seat. Mark Easton, BBC News, the West Midlands.
Keeping a good supply of people willing to work while ending free movement from Europe has been one of the main goals of ministers drawing up the Brexit agreement. The Migration Advisory Committee has taken evidence from businesses, industry bodies and government departments as part of a major inquiry into how this will be done. Today, it's published its interim report, and it highlights concerns about possible restrictions on migrants coming here in the future. Our Scotland correspondent Kieran Jenkins has been to Oban on the west coast to find out how one hotel, usually reliant on European staff, is facing up to the changes ahead.
In Oban, on the west coast of Scotland, where the ferries flit among the inner and outer Hebrides, if you're not a local, you're a long way from home. There's a thriving tourism industry here, but for the migrant workforce that serves it, the allure may be fading. Jobs to be done, nobody quite sure who, in future, will do them.
Well, the UK government now has in its hands some official advice spelling out just how fearful businesses are about the immigration picture after Brexit. And it tells them also how much uncertainty there is in places like this, reliant on tourism and on migrant labour. Neither they nor anyone knows what the immigration policy will be after Brexit, because the government hasn't written one.
What they do know here is that the effects are already being felt.
5 years ago, the majority of staff in most places were migrants, and now there's still maybe 30%, but not as many.
Good workers, says bar manager Andrew, are leaving. Advisers today told the government that migrants from European Economic Area countries are 40% less likely to be off work than their UK peers.
They're more structured, they're less likely to phone in sick.
You know, we hear about jobs that people say, oh, British, Scottish people, they don't want to do that sort of work, they don't want to do this sort of work.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. It's self-entitlement, isn't it? Yeah, I don't want to work evenings and weekends, I want a social life, but the bottom line is that you need to work to afford that life.
Employers hoping for answers have instead found a government asking itself questions about the impact on wages, the economy, and could employers not recruit locally by simply paying their staff more? 30 minutes from Oban, this hotel stands in an area almost untroubled by unemployment.
What are you finding as you go out and try and recruit people now then for the coming season?
We're short. We're short of people. We didn't open our bistro 2 days this week at the beginning of the week because we don't have enough staff to do that.
So are the wage rates in this industry putting UK workers off?
Why not pay people more? Why not pay people more and then maybe the British and the Scottish workers will come?
Well, I don't think that's ever really been an issue, you know, to be frank. We've always paid as an industry, we've always fulfilled our minimum obligations as a start point, but to be really clear, we're already paying above the minimum requirements to recruit the people we need to recruit.
First of all, because it's tourist restaurant.
Sous chef Pavel has seen the Polish community here dwindle.
You've been here while your daughter is in a different country?
Yes.
For how long?
Will be almost 10 years.
Migration is tough, he says. People are wondering if it's still worth it.
That is a big sacrifice. Every immigration is sacrifice. No matter Polish or Russian or Romanian, people immigrated. I think people, they got the same feelings, like, you know, missing family and missing everything. Like.
The next update from the government's advisers will inform, finally, a new immigration policy. In the meantime, migrants and businesses plan for a future that they cannot predict. Kieran Jenkins, Channel 4 News, Oban.
That's it.
Oban. Yes, that's it. That's Channel 4 News.